Welcome to Stuff They Didn't Teach Me in Sunday School. You know, every once in a while you read a story in the paper or see it on the TV about a guy that's been leading two lives. Usually when we see that, it's two parallel lives. He has a wife in Philadelphia and another wife in Houston or something, and families in both places. The Bible tells us about a man who really leads three lives, not all at the same time, consecutively. And that man is Moses. We want to pick up that story today in Genesis chapter 2 and finishing chapter 2, beginning at verse 11. There comes a day, we're told in verse 11, when Moses had grown up, he went out to his people and looked on their burdens, and he saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his people. Don't you imagine that Moses had a real conflicted time watching this Egyptian pound a Hebrew? He has two lives. He was born a Hebrew. He's raised in an Egyptian palace as a son of the Pharaoh's daughter, as a grandson to the Pharaoh. And on this day, he chooses to identify with that first life. We're told he looked this way and that, and seeing no one, he killed the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. When he went out the next day, behold, two Hebrews were struggling together. And he said to the man that did the wrong, "Why do you strike your fellow?" He answered, "Who made you a prince and a judge over us? Do you mean to kill me as you killed the Egyptian?" It wasn't exactly a secret. Then Moses was afraid and thought, "Surely the thing is known." When Pharaoh heard it, he sought to kill Moses, his adopted grandson. And that leads us to Moses' next life. His first 40 years of his life were spent in that palace, growing up as an Egyptian, but knowing all the while that he was a Hebrew. His first attempt at delivering the people falls flat. Doesn't meet with success at all. God's not ready. It's not God's timing. It's Moses' timing. And when Moses finds out that his crime is known, he has to go on the lam. And we're told Moses fled from Pharaoh and stayed in the land of Midian. God has another plan. Moses needs to know how to relate to the royal family, and so he has 40 years of that. He also is going to need to know how you get along in the Sinai Peninsula, an area where there's almost nothing grows and very little water. And God has a plan for that. Moses would spend the next 40 years of his life in the Sinai Peninsula. He would marry a Midianite by the name of Zipporah, have sons and daughters, and raise sheep. Moses, no doubt, thought that was the end of his life, that the rest of his life would be spent in the wilderness with his family as a sheep herder. God had other plans. And the last third of Moses' life, the last 40 years, would be spent being the deliverer that God was going to call him to be. We're going to look at that call next time. But God is setting this man up to be the leader that he needs to bring his people out of Egypt.